This is going to be an interesting video. We're going to be going over some of the latest news and happenings around Cyberpunk 2077, the up-and-coming game by CD Projekt Red. If you guys missed my previous Cyberpunk video, we actually got some pretty big news in that one that could be related to this. Not too long ago, CD Projekt had their annual financial conference. In that, they talked about Cyberpunk 2077 at this E3, with one direct quote actually being, "But this year's E3 is going to be the most important one ever for us. We have really prepared a strong show." And they also mentioned they have surprises in store without telling us what those surprises are. So naturally following this, there's been a ton of speculation as to what we can expect from this year's E3. I for one think we are almost certainly getting a release date. Doesn't necessarily mean the game is coming out in 2019. I think it's either coming out late 2019 or even early 2020. But if either of those were the case, this would be the last E3 that they have before the release of the game. And in this video, we may see more evidence for that. The first thing we're going to go over are two new leaks around this game that, taken together, could be kind of interesting, especially because they're not your typical leaks. But even beyond that, we actually do have some concrete details and evidence from CD Projekt themselves, as well as just a couple of miscellaneous details around the game that we have recently learned. So as we start to look at these two leaks, obviously take each of them with a grain of salt. I wouldn't say either of these are total outright confirmation of anything, and naturally be skeptical around any leak for a video game. Although one of the reasons I have a bit more faith than usual around these leaks is the nature of them. It's not like there's some random 4chan post or somebody that couldn't actually know this information. I think both of them do have plausible explanations. So the first apparent leak came from Territory Studios' website. This is basically a company that creates visual effects, digital experiences, and motion design. On their website, you can see some of the various games they have worked on: Forza, Need for Speed, as well as other games from pretty large companies. One such one being Cyberpunk 2077. On this page, they basically describe how they supported this game by creating a logo as well as some other graphics for it. And below that short little blurb, you could see some of the stuff they have actually done. Interestingly though, a few weeks ago, there was an extra sentence on this. That extra sentence being unveiled at E3 2018, we look forward to a 2019 release. That ended up getting quickly removed, but I think one of the reasons, as I mentioned before, that this could have more credence is the simple fact that this is a company that has worked with Cyberpunk. That is evident and proven. They do have insider knowledge to some degree. Now at the same time, this could have just been some kind of assumption. Maybe they thought it was coming out in 2019 while it really isn't, or maybe they don't know the release date at all and just thought they did. Either way though, moving on to the second leak, this is actually a bit more recent. From just 1 week ago, we could see a Facebook post that does cite that Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out on 18/10/2019. For people only used to freedom dates, that's October 18th of 2019. That is a Friday, so it certainly does seem like a plausible release date. And even further, this more recent leak is actually from somebody else in the games industry. The original source on this one is a smaller Finnish game shop, and in this they're basically citing that they heard from the publisher that is the release date of this game, and then giving a link as to where you could pre-order it from their website. Naturally, that was also taken down very quickly. You can find a new post now on their Facebook page that doesn't have any of that release date information. So I think there are two ways of looking at this. Firstly, why on earth would a small Finnish game shop possibly know the release date to a massive game like this? They were claiming that the release date was shared with them by the distributor or publisher, but is that really a plausible claim? This is definitely a smaller shop. They only have 3 locations in total. It's kind of akin to a smaller scale GameStop because they take trade-ins also. But of course, even beyond that, they do have their online store. Although on the other side of things, it does seem like they have a pretty good reputation in that they're not the type of people to leak things. In the past, we have seen true release dates leak from game distributors like this in the past. Walmart Canada's Rage 2 leak does come to mind as a pretty major one. Although something about the October 18th release date that is interesting is it is actually significant in regards to Cyberpunk. On October 18th in 2012, we got the launch of the Cyberpunk 2077 website. We found out during a live stream that day it was going to be called Cyberpunk 2077. The game was technically revealed earlier that year in May as just being a new work-in-progress Cyberpunk game, but this is also the date we saw some of the first tweets from the Cyberpunk 2077 Twitter account, tweeting out the official website for the first time ever. So naturally, with this in mind, there's two ways of looking at that. I think on one side, you could say this gives even less credit to that proposed leak. People just took a significant date and tried to popularize it or make nothing out of it. Or alternatively, that CD Projekt Red actually is using this as a significant date, the first time we really heard the name Cyberpunk 2077 specifically, and they're using that as a launching point for the game in its entirety. I think taking those two leaks together, it could definitely give you evidence. We also saw a leak late last year that did suggest another 2019 release date, but naturally they're all leaks, so take them all with a grain of salt. What about things that aren't leaks, that are official and confirmed? Well, very recently on CD Projekt's website, they actually have begun hiring for a release manager. Some of the core points of this new job listing, they're looking for somebody to take part in the coordination of all global product releases, as well as some of the daily responsibilities such as an active part of the overall product launch process, interface with global release manager to ensure successful product release, and coordinate communications and key dates between various development and publishing groups. And there's a lot more on this post that will probably also get you hyped. So naturally, any of these things alone don't mean much, but I feel like when you take the three major leaks together, you take the new job listing for a release manager, and you take the evidence that they want to have a big E3, I think it seems pretty plausible that we could get an announcement at this E3 for a release date later this year. I wouldn't say by any means that it's confirmed. To look at the other side of the argument, earlier this year, PlayStation got a behind-the-scenes look at the development of Cyberpunk 2077. In that, they do mention that even though the game is revealed now, we know a lot more about it, there is still a lot of work to be done on it. And actually following the Cyberpunk community and discussions, it seems like every time we get a statement like the PlayStation one, people are like, oh no, 2019 is rolled out. But then when you get other news, like the hiring of a release manager, everyone jumps back on the 2019 bandwagon. So I'd be cautious as you read around about this game. And one final thing I'll leave you as far as the release date goes before we move on to the next topic is actually a quote from CD Projekt's CEO all the way back from 2015's E3. This was following the announcement of Fallout 4, and Fallout 4 got announced in June, and they announced at that time, hey, it's going to be out in just this November, so you don't even have to wait that long. This was the response by the CEO. And this is how CD Projekt CEO responded at the time. We're impressed with Fallout 4's rollout. They came on stage and said, it's here, it's real, and it's coming out on this date. We're going to do something similar. We're going to wait until we could show off a very meaningful piece of it. And to be clear, this statement was after The Witcher 3 was already released. They were just working on its DLC at that point. So one pretty cool component that's going to be in Cyberpunk 2077 is genuinely failing missions. In a recent interview, we found out that there's actually not going to be your generic game over screen or the target died, mission failed. This obviously is a mainstay in a lot of modern RPGs or video games in general. In Fallout 76, if you don't complete the necessary requirements for the mission in the required time, you fail the mission, you'll have to do it over again. Well, in Cyberpunk 2077, unless your character dies, you're probably not going to see a mission failed or game over screen, you're just going to have to live with the consequences. So if you're on a mission where you have to protect a certain target and you fail to protect him and they end up dying, they'll die. The mission's going to progress and the story will have consequences based on your actions. I'm sure there is some mechanic where you can do it over, such as loading a previous save, but it's not going to force you down that route. And personally, I think this is actually really interesting. It also opens up a lot of variability among the quests. We've already heard how completing certain side quests in Cyberpunk 2077 may give you additional options in the main quest, but this unlocks a whole new portion of that. Let's say you just don't do what the person says, almost like the Stanley Parable. It will hypothetically open up even further options or choices down the line based on those actions or really inaction. And then there's one final piece of news. We also recently learned that Cyberpunk 2077 is getting a merch store. This is technically a merch store for CD Projekt Red overall, so Gwent, The Witcher, and of course Cyberpunk. If you're interested in merch for any of those games, you'll probably see something on this. They originally tweeted about it on April 2nd, and at that point said it's coming in the coming weeks. So hopefully, as it stands right now, it's not all that far off. So that pretty much wraps it up for all the new stuff we just learned around Cyberpunk 2077. I'm really excited for this game, and I'm hopeful for a 2019 release date. To not get disappointed, I'm still kind of expecting more of an early 2020, even if I definitely think certain evidence could point towards 2019. Either way though, E3 is just a couple of months away. I imagine leading up to E3, we might see a little bit of a lull around Cyberpunk news as they are saving the big stuff for the presentation, but hopefully at that presentation we get a lot, hopefully more gameplay, maybe even something like a hands-on. I will be at E3 and hopefully I'll get to play it. If I do, I will be bringing that to you. Although as long as we're on the topic of Cyberpunk 2077, something I've been kind of thinking about in regards to this channel and that game and really this channel's future I have a pretty strong inclination following this year's E3, my channel will undergo kind of a pretty big change in content, especially when you compare it to where I was for last year's E3. At last year's E3, it was all speculation and hype for Fallout 76 after a couple years of almost exclusively covering Fallout 4 with the occasional Skyrim mixed in. But as I've kind of been building up to with videos like this one and several other ones, but after this E3, I'm expecting something very, very different. A lot of content and coverage on Cyberpunk 2077 and the Outer Worlds. Of course, there still will be Fallout 76 videos mixed in depending on whatever announcement we do see, but I think following this E3 and really as we move into the end of this year, you're going to see a lot more diversification on this channel. As I do plan to fully cover the Outer Worlds and Cyberpunk and probably do full live stream playthroughs of both of them as I kind of did with Fallout 76 as its beta did launch. Either way, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. I'm very excited for the future of this game as well as all those other ones I just mentioned, and I think this is going to be a really big E3, definitely one I'm going to remember. With that though, I thank you all again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.